I'll start with communications is hard. No slides, I barely have a talk. Communications is very hard. I'm finding it a little hard being up here. It's even harder when it's in another language. I recently binge watched the Star Trek show Enterprise. I'm a little slow to catch on, a couple years behind. And one of the things that I found most interesting in that series was the early days of the Universal Translator and trying to develop a new technology for use in so many things and communicating so many different hard concepts across cultures. Coming a couple centuries closer, nearer term to that, at AIA we recently put out a study on what the future looks like a little bit closer to home, a little bit closer in the future in 2050. And we worked with McKinsey and we talked to about 70 CEOs of aerospace companies. We talked to government customers and we said, what do you think the future looks like in 30 years? What does aerospace look like? And they came out with a lot of themes that emerged during these interviews of widespread use of drones in a variety of roles, increasing urban air mobility, supersonic travel that's quieter and more widely used, and space being increasingly accessible. As an aside to that, throughout the report, space was underneath all of this. None of these visions of the future, even if they weren't specifically space-related, happen without space technology. So we're using that report at AIA to build our roadmap. How do we get there from here? What are the policy, regulatory, technology things that need to happen between now and then to get to widespread use of drones and get to urban air mobility and being able to take a flying taxi this afternoon instead of the Uber that I took. So that actually gets me back to that translation thing. A lot of what we do at AIA is translating industry to government and translating the policy and regulatory things that we see needing to happen to enable the technology development that gets us to those futures. When I worked at the Pentagon, when I first got there, I would sit in the back of the room when my boss had meetings, when industry would come in to see my boss, and I would think, I don't really understand a lot of what they're saying. They seem to have a different view. And the longer I was there, the more I realized that wasn't just me and my inexperience. That was that they were speaking, if not a different language, maybe a different dialect. Industry sees the world and speaks a slightly different language than government speaks, and slightly different way than the government sees the world. So a lot of what we do at AIA is help provide that translation function. A lot of what I do every day is work with my member companies for finding the common threads in their views on different policy and regulatory issues and pulling those views together to find a consensus position that I can take back to a government agency and say, we as an industry have this opinion on a policy, or we as an industry suggest that as you look to this field or this factor that you're trying to regulate, these are some things you might consider. So sometimes we don't have a single voice on issues. Sometimes instead of being able to say we as an industry, we provide a forum to be able to talk through those issues instead. We also do some of that translating to the government. I hope that everybody in this room now knows that if you use your card at an ATM, that you're using GPS. I think that example has been fairly widely used. But there are a lot of folks that you talk to every day that probably don't understand the role that space has in their lives every day, even if they never speak about space. And so more and more, as we talk about our Vision 2050 study, as we talk about what the aerospace industry does, we're talking to the public as well about the role that aerospace plays in their everyday lives. We also do a little bit of translating of DC to those of our member companies that are outside of DC. It's a very different language here, as many of you know who work inside the Beltway. So that translating role is really underlies so much of getting to that future vision, whether it is 30 years in the future with an air taxi, or whether that's a couple centuries in the future with a universal translator, hopefully sooner rather than later. And being able to tell the story about what you're doing, what you're working on, why that is important, is hugely important to getting that work done. So I just leave you with the thought that a lot of what you do is translating to explain the projects that you're working on and why they are so important to be done. Thank you.